Welcome to Navigating Healthcare Inquiry with PICO. I'm Emily Davis, one of the librarians here at the university. My focuses are health and human performance, nursing, social work, and chemistry, many of which PICO questions could apply while doing research. You can contact any of the librarians at tamuc.edu/askwaters or me directly at emily.davis@tamuc.edu. Today, we are going to define the components of the PICO acronym and its relevance to healthcare. We are then going to formulate a focused research question using the PICO framework. Finally, we're going to search an academic database using our PICO question. Any questions before we get started? Great, let's begin. Understanding PICO. What is PICO? You may be familiar with PICO, and this is a refresher, but for those new to healthcare research, PICO is a consistent question framework for developing researchable healthcare questions. PICO stands for patient and/or problem, intervention, comparison, outcome, and time. For benefits of using the PICO framework, search precision. PICO increases the number of relevant results. It creates a standardized approach promoting consistency and methodology, which allows for a better comparison between studies. The PICO framework can also help with critical evaluation and help you determine how relevant a source is. And finally, stating the PICO elements in your own research enhances transparency and makes it easier for others to replicate your results, thereby increasing your credibility. Developing a PICO question. I'm going to create a PICO question using the following scenario. In an effort to enhance the overall quality of care in your oncology clinic, you are leading a quality improvement project focused on managing fatigue in cancer patients. After hearing about the potential benefits of meditation, you decide to use the PICO framework to evaluate its effects compared to standard care on the quality of life over 6 months. By reviewing the literature, you hope to gather sufficient evidence to propose a pilot program that includes meditation sessions for patients dealing with fatigue. I've highlighted some key terms that we can use to develop a good PICO question. We'll also use these terms when we begin our search. The first step to evidence-based practice research is to rephrase a patient care issue in the form of a focused and answerable question. For my scenario, we know the patient problem is fatigue in cancer patients. The term cancer patient is a little too broad, so we're going to narrow it down to just adult cancer patients. Our intervention is meditation, and we're comparing it to standard care with the goal or outcome of improving their quality of life over a time of 6 months. All of this together creates the question in adult cancer patients experiencing fatigue, what are the effects of meditation compared with standard care on improving quality of life within 6 months? While our question is an intervention therapy question, there are other types of questions that also use the PICO framework. You can find more details about other types of questions in Evidence-Based Practices in Nursing and Healthcare by Melanick and Fineout Overholt, but here is a template for asking different PICO questions. I have also provided examples of each template in use. I will share this slide deck with everyone so that you can review these whenever you need to. You may notice that not every question uses time, and this is okay. In fact, when doing initial literature searches, you may want to leave time out of your search query to gather more results. Now we will begin the process to search for evidence. Starting with our question, in adult cancer patients experiencing fatigue, what are the effects of meditation compared to standard care on improving quality of life within 6 months? We will break down each component to determine what search terms we want to start with when creating a search query. We'll do this by starting a search log. For P, we want to think of the different ways we can describe the group of people with a similar complaint. In our question, we used adult patients experiencing fatigue. Now, there are many ways to indicate cancer. We can, of course, use the term cancer, but there's also neoplasm, oncology, tumor. Note that I have both the American and British spelling of tumor. Both of these are valid for my research. There are also multiple terms we can use for fatigue, like exhaustion. Putting that all together, our first piece could look something like this. Cancer, or neoplasm, or oncology, or tumor, or malignant. And fatigue, or tired, or letharg, or exhaust. Please note that I'm using a mixed search strategy here by including multiple Boolean operators, nested searching with the parentheses, the truncation or wildcard searching with the asterisks. You can break this down into multiple smaller searches if you're more comfortable. This is just an example of what the P in a PICO search query could look like. For I, we want to think of different ways we plan to treat, medicate, diagnose, and/or observe the patient's care. In our question, we plan to use meditation. So how many ways can we indicate meditation? Listing a few here: mindfulness, breathing, even yoga. All of these and probably more could be considered meditation. A possible example of what the I component could look like in our search query is meditate, or mindful, or breathe, or relax, or yoga, or guided imagery. Once again, using a mixed strategy, I have used Boolean operators, truncation, and now also phrase searching with the quotation marks. For C, we will need to describe the main alternative we are considering. In the case of our question, the alternative is standard care. The standard care, sometimes referred to as usual care, depends on the clinical practice of the area in which the study is being done and may not be stated in a formal PICO question, as the research published is generally intended for other scholars and researchers that are similar to the original researcher. Keep this in mind when you're researching. You may need to look into the background of the study and the clinical practices of the publication area. For O, we will need to describe the desired outcome or results from the intervention that are measurable. This includes improvement of symptoms, no symptoms, or even complications. For our scenario, we are looking to improve the quality of life. Possible terms could be life quality or well-being. Note that there are 3 different ways in which to spell well-being, all of which are valid. So a possible search strategy for our outcome is quality of life, or quality of living, or life quality, or well-being, or well-being, or well-being. Remember to use quotation marks around any phrases you are using. Databases take your search words literally, and there is a difference between using and not using the quotation marks. For T, we need to describe the time frame for the outcome. This is not always required nor present, so I would suggest starting without it. Also, most databases that have PICO search tools do not use the component time. For our scenario, we are looking at 6 months. Possible strategies are 6 months with and without the quotation marks and 6 next months. The last one is for select databases. Some databases have special requirements when it comes to time-based searches. Usually there is a search tip option. If it is not located on the main search page, then you may find it on the advanced search page of a database. The search tips will let you know of any special search strategies that database may offer. Before we get into the demonstration, I want to cover assessing evidence. Here's a pyramid representing the hierarchy of evidence, sometimes called level of evidence, that is used to assess relevant sources. There are many different versions of this hierarchy, and you may be familiar with a different one, but all of them contain the same foundational information. This particular one is sourced from Duke University Medical Center Library and Archives. I chose this one due to the amount of detail. The aim is to identify the highest level of available evidence. Keeping this in mind, the higher you go, the less amount of information available, but what is there will be considered a higher quality. Now for the demonstration. While you can use OneSearch to begin your research, I highly suggest checking out the nursing databases first. It'll be easier to locate relevant sources using databases that specialize in healthcare research. To access a list of nursing databases, select the Database tab on the Waters Library homepage. Below the search bar, we should see the text Browse by Subject. Click on this will take us to a list of subjects where we can select nursing. In this Best Bet box at the top of our database list are the databases that are recommended to find the most relevant sources, but you can use the others to also retrieve healthcare research. I suggest starting with Cochrane Library, and this is the one I will be using for the demonstration. To access the search features, we will click on Advanced Search, found on the navigation bar at the top right of the page. To point out a couple of key features and why I recommend this database over others, Cochrane Library has a great mesh term lookup tool, as well as a search manager that is great for building and recording your searches. It makes creating a search log a lot easier to do. Cochrane Library does have a PICO tool. Please notice it does not include the element time. Let's start with the PICO tool so you can see how precise it can be. I'm going to use the same question we have been using: adult cancer patients experiencing fatigue, meditation versus standard care, and improving quality of life. Typing in our first term, adult, notice the drop-down option that appears. Cochrane Library requires you to select one of these options. This is great because it guarantees you are using the PICO terms that are used in this database. Next term, cancer. While cancer by itself is on the list, there are also many types listed individually. So there is a chance a source that would be relevant is using specific cancer as its PICO term. I'm going to select cancer as my term. To the side, I have the option of selecting a different PICO component for this term. Some terms may be used for more than one component, while others can only be used for one. The tool will only give you options if there is a choice to make. This is specific to the Cochrane Library. Moving on to the next term, fatigue. I'm going to take a minute and run this search to see how many hits I get. Since PICO is so precise, there's a high possibility that this will only return a few sources. I was correct. There are only 6 sources, and with such a short list, I can select Show PICOs to see if any of these are relevant. The closest one is the top one, physical activity for the management of cancer-related fatigue in adults. Even still, this is not exactly what I'm searching for. I have a couple of options. I can go back and play around with my PICO terms, or I can move on and try searching manually. Let's start with medical terms, or otherwise known as MESH terms. These terms act as tags or indexes in medical research. They are chosen and assigned to articles by real humans, not computers. As such, it takes longer for articles to be indexed. My suggestion is to search with MESH terms first. Once you have exhausted that route, then try searching with the same terms, but treat them as keywords instead. We will start with our PICO terms we discovered in the previous tool. First term, adult. Again, we have the drop-down box, but unlike PICO search tool, we do not have to select anything. Clicking look up, I'm given the definition of the term, confirm that it is a MESH term, and then given other possible matches. In the second column, I have the option to expand that term or only search that term. Clicking add to search manager locks the term as one of our search terms. Looking at the search manager, we can see the term locked in, and to the right is a number. This indicates how many results there are that use adult as a MESH term. Each line in the search manager is treated like a single search. If we add all our terms individually, both as MESH term and as keywords, then we can mix and match. Example here, where I have added all my terms, then on the last line, I told the database to combine searches 1 through 5. Clicking on the number at the end, I can view my results. I'm going to wrap this up with a few key points. The PICO framework is a consistent formula for developing research questions in healthcare. You use the elements from your PICO question to create your initial list of search terms. Pair these terms with other search techniques such as Boolean operators, truncation, and filters to refine your search. Here's a list of resources. Don't forget to ask a librarian if you're needing help or just have a question. Check out the research with PICO guide and MESH terms from the National Library of Medicine. Databases I would suggest using are the Cochrane Library, Sonal Complete, Ovid MCare, and PubMed Central. Thank you for joining me today. Here is my contact information. Please reach out if you have any questions.